So welcome back students in this series of Node.js. Now in the previous video we have discussed about node modules and we have created node module, custom node module, and we have required that and used that. Now in this video we'll discuss node HTTP module, which is hypertext transfer protocol module, which is the most important module of complete node series because this module is responsible for creating servers. So we have discussed that importance of node, that we can with the help of node can create servers. So now this module is responsible for that. So with the help of HTTP module we can create servers. As per the definition, the HTTP module can create an HTTP server that listens to a server port and gives a response back to the client. So what is a port? We'll discuss that in the coding part. But whole thing is that a node module can accept some kind of request from the client and also give response back to the client. So that is whole process for the server. So there is two things, one is client and one is server. Now a server is which can accept a client request and can generate a response and send the response back to the client. So now let's practically learn how to implement this HTTP module and how to use that in real life scenario. So now let me open my Visual Studio Code. Now to use this HTTP module, let me just clear this out. For that we have to require HTTP. So we'll write down HTTP equals to require HTTP. So this is how we can require HTTP module, and as per the HTTP module is inbuilt, so we don't have to mention that same directory or anything else. We just have to write down HTTP in this. Now the function in HTTP module that is responsible for creating a server is known as create server. So we'll write down HTTP dot create server. So this is the function. Now in this function we have to pass a function which is known as a callback function with two parameters. One is request and other is response. This REQ and RES is just for reference. You can write anything over here, but just you have to pass two parameters. One is request and other is response. Now as I said, the server is what which can accept a request and generate a response for the client. So this request object will bring the data from the client and this response will get the data outside of this function for the client. So now let me just write down. So now I want to send some kind of data to the client. So I'll write down response dot write. So this response dot write method is used to generate some kind of output for the client. So we'll write down response dot write. Let's say hello world. This is my first HTTP response for the client. A client is what? A client can be anything who can send a request. For example, a client can be a mobile app, a client can be a website, a client can be a software, a smartwatch, any device or any software which can send a request to the server is known as a client. So this is the request for that. Also we have to send a response dot end. So we have two things, one is response dot write and the other is response dot end. So this response dot end is mandatory at the last line of the server definition. So we have to pass server dot end and let's say last line of server definition. Now we can write as many as response dot write lines we want, but the response dot end can be only one. The response dot end basically act like return statement in the function. So when we have created a node sample or any module, we have a return statement at the end, which is used to terminate that particular statement. In the HTTP server, in the create server method, we have that response dot end for that particular same task. So this is the end line of the server. Now we just have to, just a second, we have to close this over here. So this is how we can close this. Now after closing that create server, we have to pass a listen module. So we have to pass a listen. So now let me show you our output. So this server will listen to the port, let's say 8050. So this port I have defined for this server. Now let me execute this. node second node.js, and now let me open the browser, and now let me open my browser and search for this port. So the port for that is, the port I have decided is 8050. So we'll search localhost 8050. So we'll search localhost, not 3000. 3000 is the default port for the React. We'll write down 8050, which is the custom port for our module. And now on this port we must get a output. So here you can see, hello world, this is my first app, response. So at the end we are getting last line of the server definition, which is sent with the help of response.end. Now we are getting the data onto the server with the help of that node module that we have just defined. Now what is the purpose of this port over here? This localhost is basically IP address of my machine. But what about this 8050? Now, so when we have an IP address of machine, we can easily reach that machine by any HTTP client or by any remote device of the world. Any remote device from the world. But just IP address is not sufficient for a server. Why? Because on a single machine, on a single IP address, there can be many servers. For example, if in my machine I have Node.js, I have MongoDB, I have React.js, I have MySQL, I have let's say so many kind of servers running at the same time. But when I send request for a IP address, so the machine has to decide to which server this request has to be redirected. Now for that redirection, for the individual address of a server machine, we have to define some port. So for that port is required. So for example, let's say a single device have 5 servers. One is React, one is MySQL server, one is your let's say Python server, one is Java server, and one is Node server. So each server will have a port number. Let's say the React server will have a port number 3000. Our Node server will have a port of 8050. Let's say the MySQL server will have a port of 3060. So when the request comes for that IP address and with the port number, so the machine can easily identify that request comes for this particular server and redirect that request to that particular server. Now the server will accept a request, generate output, and send that response back to the client. So this is how a flow of that client server architecture works in the Node.js. So now we have discussed that how to send some kind of response to the client. So we can accept some kind of data from the client as well. For example, in the query string, if I pass some kind of data, so how can we pass some kind of data? So the format for that is we have to pass a slash, then a question mark, then we can pass some data. So let's say I have passed name equals to Kuldeep, and we can separate two data with the help of an and. Let's say age equals to 35, then suppose we have city equals to Mohali. So this is how we can send some kind of data to the server as well. So if I click on enter, we are getting the same file. Now in server, how to fetch this data from the client? We can easily do that with the help of this request. So when a client sends some kind of data to the server, that object, that request object is used to fetch that data. So we'll write down, so before end here, we'll write down response dot write, and let me fetch that data with the help of request dot URL. So now let's see. Also let's terminate this. So terminate a node server, we'll use control C. So we'll write down node second JS. Again I have restarted this server, and let's pass the request once again. So let me pass the request. So now you can see the data we have, name 22. Okay, so 22 is for this. Okay, so this is the response we are getting. Name Kuldeep, age 35, city Mohali. We are getting this 22 due to this inverted commas. We don't have to use this inverted commas in the query string, so we'll just remove this. So again, now you can see. So we have the data, name Kuldeep, age 35, city Mohali. So this is how we can fetch some kind of data from the request of the client. And also let me just generate a simple response on the behalf of this request. So now if I want to convert this query string, this URL string, into a JSON object, for that we'll use a module. So we'll use a URL module. So we have URL equals to require, we have to require, and the name of the module is URL module. So we'll control save this. Now from this request.url, we'll write down where obj stands for object. So I'll just write down. Now from this URL module, we'll use a method of parsing. So we'll write down URL dot parse. Now we want to parse what? The request.url. So we'll pass the request dot URL, and also we have to pass this true because the by default this is false. This is basically the encoding part of the URL. Now last we have to put dot query. So we have to create a query out of this. So this will convert this complete request.url into a object. Now let me save this and get some kind of data out of this object. So we'll write down object dot name plus object dot age. So, or just simplifying that, we'll just write down welcome, just like that. Now let's terminate this and again execute this. Now let me open my server and check the output. So let's again send the request. So now you can see at the end we are getting welcome Kuldeep. If I just change the request, let me send Rakesh on the place of Kuldeep. So and then we're getting welcome Rakesh. So this is how we can fetch the data from the request.url and parse that data with the help of this URL module inside a JSON object. So this object we are creating is a JSON object finally, and from that JSON object we can easily get some kind of data. So if we are getting, let me check, let me say your age is equals to plus object dot age. Let's save this, execute the node module once again. Let's check the output. Also let's add a /n. So /n is basically for the next line. Let me just restart the module. Let me refresh this, or we can, let me just resend this value. Okay, so now you're getting this welcome Rakesh. So this Rakesh is from that request.url, and this age equals 35 is also from the request.url. So this is how you can utilize the requests from that particular user inside the node module. So this is the basic about HTTP servers, how to create a basic server, how to accept some kind of response, how to generate some response for the client, how to accept some request from the client and parse that request inside a JSON object, and then after how to use that JSON object into your code. So that's all about HTTP servers. In the next video, we'll discuss about HTML forms, how to fetch data from a form, and then we'll discuss HTTP methods, which is get and post. So thank you for watching this video.